Judge Tanya Chutkan has handed the failed former president Donald Trump a significant setback in one of his four criminal trials, deciding that the trial will be roughly 2 years sooner than Donald Trump and his lawyers wanted. It is extraordinary. It sets up an incredible 2024, which the dynamics of which we will discuss in a moment. And it has also sent Trump into a meltdown spiral, which we will talk about later. Newsweek reports Judge Chutkan hands Trump loss with trial date, setting a date for Trump's trial on the federal charges that he tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Remember, this is separate from Trump's New York State charges. This is separate from the other federal charges. This is separate from the Georgia criminal charges. This is just one case. Chutkan has scheduled the trial to begin on March 4, 2024. The date is more than 2 years earlier than the April 2026 date requested by Trump's attorneys, who wanted to push the trial back until after the election. Now, let's say one thing about that. We all know generally about the motivations for pushing trials back. Most lawyers, or not most lawyers, all lawyers I've spoken to will tell you that in most cases, it's better to push the trial back. You have a right to request a speedy trial, but there are lots of reasons to delay trials. Delay trials because prosecutorial priorities can change over time, and you may end up with prosecutors more willing to negotiate or offer a better plea or whatever the case may be. Delay because witnesses forget and or die or whatever the case may be. Delay because evidence can be misplaced or degrade. These are general principles. Whether this applies to Trump's cases specifically is a matter of some discussion, but generally there's lots of reasons that one would seek to delay trials. In addition, when it comes to Trump, we know what the game is, okay? We know what the game is because we saw what it was when Trump was president. While he was president, regularly having lawyers argue, as president, I can't be encumbered by investigations, and I certainly can't be encumbered by charges. And then after he was president, I am a potential candidate for 2024. I can't be encumbered with investigations. No, absolutely not. When he announced that he was running in 2024, you can't encumber a candidate for the presidency with investigations and charges. Now they're making that similar or same argument. If Donald Trump wins, and then they go, okay, you won, but it's April of 2026 is time for your trial. Then he will shift to arguing, I'm currently the president. You can't encumber me with a criminal trial. So it's all being done in bad faith. Fine. Judge Chutkan has decided that this is all going to start in March. And prosecutors asked for January 2nd, 2024, which I believe is the first judicial day of 2024. The trial is going to start the day before Super Tuesday. That's the day where voters in 15 states and one territory will vote in the Republican primary. Trump's campaign criticized Chutkan for the date. The campaign said the date set today deprives Trump of his constitutional right to a fair trial, a seminal bedrock of America, and continues to expose the corruption of the witch hunts being thrown against President Trump. Former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani said to Newsweek he was not surprised about the date set, that the U.S. District Court judge's reputation is that she moves cases quickly. You know, there's a bunch of interesting things to discuss here. Trump and his lawyers want 2026. And also, they've been furious about how long it took to bring charges. And they seem to sort of want it both ways. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. The charges should have been brought far more quickly. This all should have been adjudicated and wrapped up far more quickly. They delayed it to their advantage, thanks to the schedule of the election or whatever. No evidence of that, by the way. But it all is taking too long. And now they're stomping their feet and saying, we don't want a quick trial, which, by the way, remember how many times has Trump lauded quick trial in China during his recent speeches? But now all of a sudden, he wants the slowest possible trial. He wants it both ways. But there's another detail that's an interesting one to consider. If indeed these cases against Trump are so weak, if Trump has so much exonerating evidence that he's going to be presenting at trial, wouldn't he want to get this to trial as soon as possible so that he can rise victorious in exoneration and acquittal and use that to prove that the charges were unfair and political and say, look, I was right. They are trying to keep me down. Come and vote for me. Let's show them we're not going to tolerate this. You would think that that would be a great thing to be able to do. Quickly exonerate yourself, get an acquittal. Except he wants to delay the trial as long as possible, casting more doubt about his guilt or innocence. It doesn't really make sense. Everyone should want a trial before the Republican primary is over, especially if you think Trump is innocent. If you think Trump is innocent, you should want him exonerated as soon as possible. At the same time, if you think he's guilty, you should also want him convicted quickly, because there's the risk that you choose him as your nominee, he later gets convicted, and that torpedoes his chance of winning the general election. The only reason I can think of that you would want to delay this as long as possible is if you think there may be a conviction, but you still want the guy to win, and you believe the conviction will hurt his chances. We are going to find out soon, from a very practical perspective, is it possible to be a defendant in 4 criminal trials at the same time, in different jurisdictions, and also successfully run for president at the same time? Is it humanly possible? It's sort of like David Blaine spending days in a box or whatever he claims to have done. Is this something that can be done? Can you run for president successfully while being a defendant in 4 criminal trials? Putting aside just the presidency part of it, it would be a lot for anybody to be a defendant in even 2 criminal trials. Even being a defendant in 1 serious criminal trial often consumes one's life until that trial is over. And Trump is going to be a defendant in 4 trials and running for president. And this is why he flipped out last night after this declaration was made by Judge Tanya Chutkan. Let's talk about that next.